It is the largest thing humanity has ever built to float, and it cost more than an aircraft carrier. And it was designed from the first bolt to never go anywhere. It has no destination. It will never make port, never cross an ocean, never do the one thing a ship exists to do. It was towed out to a single patch of open sea off the coast of Australia, chained to the bottom, and told to stay there for a quarter of a century. The most expensive ship ever launched is a ship built to sit still. And the reason it can't move is exactly the reason it should frighten you. This is Prelude, Shell's floating gas plant, and calling it a ship almost undersells what it is. Roughly 488 meters long, wider than a city block, displacing something on the order of 600,000 tons when fully ballasted, several times the weight of the biggest aircraft carrier ever built. It is not a vessel that carries a factory. It is a factory that happens to float. Its job is to sit 200 kilometers off the northwest coast of Australia, directly over an undersea field of natural gas, suck that gas up out of the seabed, and turn it into liquid right there on the water. No pipeline to shore, no land plant, nothing. And to do that, it has to hold its position over that one spot on the ocean, through everything the sea can throw at it, for around 25 years without ever leaving. To understand why never moving is the terrifying part, you have to understand what it's doing while it sits there. To turn natural gas into a liquid, you cannot just cool it a little. You have to chill it to roughly minus 162 degrees Celsius, cold enough that the gas collapses into a liquid 600 times smaller than its gas form, cold enough that a splash of it would freeze steel solid in an instant. That cryogenic liquid is then held in enormous tanks in the belly of the hull. So picture what's actually floating out there. A structure the size of 4 soccer fields, carrying a lake of liquid at a temperature that turns ordinary metal brittle as glass, bobbing on the open ocean in a part of the world famous for one thing: cyclones. That's the trap the engineers built themselves into. A normal ship survives a storm by pointing its bow into the waves, riding it out, or simply sailing away from the weather days before it arrives. Prelude can't. It's chained to the gas field. When a cyclone comes, it cannot run. It has to stand there and take it. And it's holding a cargo that, if it sloshes too hard in those tanks, or if the hull flex is wrong in the cold, does not behave like water in a bathtub. It behaves like a bomb that only needs a crack and a spark. So, how do you keep 600,000 tons pinned to one spot in cyclone country for 25 years? You build the single most important part of the whole machine, and it's a part most people have never heard of: the turret. Running down through the front of the hull is an immense cylindrical tower, anchored to the seabed by a spread of massive mooring chains, each link heavy enough to require its own crane. The entire structure, all 600,000 tons of it, hangs off that turret and is free to rotate around it. When the wind and the waves shift, the whole colossal ship slowly weather vanes, swinging around the fixed turret to point its strongest face into the storm, like a compass needle the size of a skyscraper lying on its side. It doesn't fight the ocean. It pivots with it. Everything. The survival of the crew, the containment of that cryogenic lake, the entire $15 billion bet, rests on that one rotating joint never failing. If the idea of a floating bomb that isn't allowed to run from a hurricane is getting under your skin, do an old broadcaster a favor and hit subscribe. We take apart a new colossus of engineering every week, and we always show you the price it's paying. Because here's the part the press releases left out. When Prelude finally started up, it didn't work the way the brochure promised. Not long after it began producing, the whole plant tripped and went dark, and it stayed troubled for a long stretch. Repeated shutdowns, a loss of power that knocked out safety systems. And at one point, workers had to be taken off the platform while regulators dug into what went wrong. Think about what that means out there. A power failure on a normal ship is a bad day. A power failure on a floating cryogenic plant is the moment the machines that keep that lake of liquid gas cold and contained stop running. And the one thing you cannot do is start the engines and steer to safety. The thing that makes it efficient, that it never has to move, is the same thing that means when something goes wrong, no one is going anywhere. Now, put the cost together, because this is where the real number lives. The build price alone runs into the tens of billions of dollars, by some accounts 12 to 17 billion, making it very likely the single most expensive floating object ever constructed. But the build price is the part everyone quotes and then forgets. The number nobody puts on the plaque is the forever cost. The inspectors who have to check a hull for coal cracks that can start anywhere. The engineers who watch that turret joint for the wear that 25 years of a whole ship swinging around it will grind into it. The crew who live for weeks at a time on top of a cryogenic plant that cannot flee its own worst day. You do not pay for a thing like this once. You pay for it every single day it stays out there, holding its position, holding its breath. And that's the thing the launch footage never says. We look at a machine like Prelude, and we see the ultimate flex of engineering, bigger than a carrier, a factory floating on the sea, gas pulled straight from the seabed and liquefied on the water. But the size isn't the achievement, the stillness is. Everything about it is a bet that a structure this large can be held perfectly still, in the most violent stretch of ocean it could have been placed, for longer than most cars stay on the road, and that nothing in all that time slips. Cut the mooring, stop the inspections, walk away from the turret watch, and Prelude wouldn't drift off tomorrow. It would do something worse. It would keep floating exactly where it is, looking exactly as unsinkable as it does in the photographs, while the coal works quietly at its steel and the sea works quietly at its chains, right up until the storm it couldn't turn away from. That's the part they don't tell you about the great machines. The most dangerous ones aren't the ones racing somewhere. They're the ones that were built to never move at all, because when the day comes that they need to, they can't.